I'm sorry, Bugs Bunny. It's, you know, it's the rules. It's not me. I'm not, you know, racist. Sudina the Kalindaka. You might have noticed that Sudina the Kalindaka looked a lot like Philip J. Fry from Futurama. Of course, they didn't have cameras back then, and no one was really, you know, doing portraiture painting of the naughty monks and nuns back then. So we don't know what they look like. He probably looks nothing like Fry from Futurama, but that's just who's going to be representing him in the Buddhist Books podcast Rogues Gallery, Tipiṭaka Rogues Gallery, from here on out. So what did he do? Sudina the Kalindaka had sex with his former wife. Before he was a monk, he was a married man, and he left that life and became a monk. And long story short, his parents talked him into just one time having sex with his former wife so that they could have a child, so they could pass on the inheritance. If you want to hear about it, check out Parajika 1. I'm moving on. Dania the Potter's Son, the Hamburglar from the old McDonald's ads, because the rule that was established is don't steal. What he did was he stole wood sticks from King Senia Bimbisara of Magadha in Parajika 2. Next up, Megalandika, a sham recluse, here represented by Chikobo from Princess Mononoke. He murdered a group of monks because they asked him to. They said, you can have our bowls and robes if you kill us. And he did that. So he wasn't part of the Sangha. He wasn't a Buddhist. He was a follower of another sect, I guess, or a sham recluse. He just wasn't a real guy. He was a real guy, basically, in the story, but he wasn't part of the Sangha. But anyway, so the rule, don't murder, don't cause others to murder, you know, don't take away life from a human being. Parajika 3. Next, the Venerable Sayasaka, here represented by Peter Griffin from Family Guy. So he was really sad. And then the Venerable Udayin, we'll get to him later, told the Venerable Sayasaka, why don't you try masturbating? And so he's like, really? Should I do that? And Udayin said, I do. And so Sayasaka tried it, and he was walking around in a much better mood. And then, why are you in such a good mood, Sayasaka? Oh, well, I emitted semen with my hand, is how it's described in the Tipitaka. Masturbation, of course, is the English word for that. Okay, next up, the Venerable Udayin, who I just mentioned. You're already familiar with him. Here represented by Glenn Quagmire from Family Guy. So in addition to recommending that Sayasaka masturbate in Sangha Disesa 1, by the way, so that's not one of the rules where you get kicked out. This is a rule where you have to have a formal meeting, and you're on probation for a while, and you have to go through the Manatta discipline, and you're back at stage 1 of your progress. So it's a big rule, but not the biggest rule. So in Sangha Disesa 2, Udayin rubbed up against the Brahmin's wife. Don't do that. In Sangha Disesa 3, he invited, ladies came over and said, can we see your house or your hut? Because it was supposed to be a really good hut. And he invited them in, and he talked about their privates, praised them, their privates, and blamed and begged and implored, asked, questioned, described, exhorted, and abused verbally about their private parts. He, in Sangha Disesa 4, Udayin propositions the widow. She undresses a widow. There's a follower of his, and he goes and he speaks the Dharma, and she's like, is there anything else I can do? And he's like, well, and so she's like, okay, you sure? And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. So she takes her clothes off, and he says, who could touch this evil-smelling wretch, spits and leaves? Don't do that, Udayin. Sangha Disesa 4, that was. In Sangha Disesa 5, Udayin acts as a go-between Naked disciples, maybe Jainists, I don't know. Maybe there were other naked disciples among the Shrayana sects of the era. Some of whom we know about, mostly through the Tipitaka, and most of them we don't know about. So anyway, some naked disciples said, "Hey, Udayin, we want our son to marry that girl, the courtesan's daughter." And Udayin was like, "All right," and he went and told the courtesans, "Hey, let your daughter marry the son of that family. They're good, I know them." And they're like, "Well, if you say so, Udayin." And then it turns out badly. Don't do that, Udayin. Don't be a go-between. Next, the young girl of a family had been given in marriage to a boy of a certain family. Udayin showed up at the girl's parents' house and said, "Where's the girl?" And they said, "Well, she married, that guy." So he went to their house and then sat with the girl in a private place to speak the Dhamma, as Dharma for the Sanskrit folk. So, of course, people speculated that there was something fishy going on. Don't do that, Udayin. He also sat with a young girl, I think the same young girl, in a visible place that was far enough away from people that they couldn't hear what they were talking about. And people were like, "What are they talking about?" Don't do that, Udayin. Udayin's former wife, this one's fun. Okay, I'll run through it really quickly. Udayin was married. Then he became a monk and his wife became a nun. So now they have to behave like monk and nun and they're not like a married couple anymore. So his former wife, he would go have lunch with her every day. And every day she would expose parts, her privates, and he would touch himself, and become aroused. And so every day he did this, right, at lunch. And then, one day, after who knows how many months of this building up, he, on the inside of his robe, I'll let you use your imagination, and so she cleaned it for him, and it touched her in a certain place, and then she got pregnant. Don't do that, Udayin. All right, so the rule ends up being monks aren't allowed to have nuns wash their robes unless the nuns are related to them. That's actually Nisagiya 4. So we've moved beyond Sangha Disesa. The where's the girl in a private place was Aniyata 1 and 2. Aniyata means undetermined because it kind of depends on, certain things. Like if he did do something inappropriate or not. So if he's if he's in private with a girl, then it's either this issue or it's that issue, depending on what he was doing in private. So they question him and say, "What did you do?" So it's not clear exactly what kind of rule it is until you get more information. Next, so that was Nisagiya 4, was Udayin's former life, the lunch accident, right? Next, in Nisagiya 5, Udayin pressured the nun Upalavana into giving him her inner robe. They don't say why he wanted it, but anyway, moving along. Udayin taught Dhamma to women privately. It was a mother and her daughter-in-law in their home. And, anyway, people speculated. Women in private. Don't teach women in private. You have to have a man there. That was Pakitiya 7. Pakitiya is expiation, but not expiation regarding forfeiture. That was Nisagiya, if I remember correctly. Udayin next made a robe for a nun with a bold design in the middle. He didn't tell her it had a bold design. He told her to sit in a certain area where all the other nuns would see. And when she revealed the bold design, then people were like, "Where did you get that robe?" So monks don't make robes for nuns. That's Pakitiya 26. Udayin sat together in a private place with his former wife, who was a nun. That's Pakitiya 30. If I had to guess, I'd say he broke that rule before he, on the inside of his robe, right? Or maybe he broke both of these rules at the same time, or whatever. So some of these rules seem to be out of order. That'll become more apparent as we move through this fun thing. Udayin next shot crows with a bow and arrow and cut off their heads because they were annoying him. And he put their heads on little stakes. That was Pakitiya 61. See what I mean? Udayin. He's like sexually harassing women, spitting and saying, ew, who would do that? And then cutting off the heads of crows. He's a little weird, Udayin. All right, next, the monks at Alavi. So as you can see, we have sort of random characters from the Earth Kingdom in Avatar, The Last Airbender, representing the monks at Alavi. In Sangha Disesa 6, they built very grand huts and viharas for themselves, for which they were begging the local community for supplies, to such a degree that the local community would run from monks. And even apparently at one point they saw cows in the distance and they all hid because they thought they were monks. So, don't do that, monks at Alavi. The rule ends up being, don't make your house bigger than a certain size. Next, they were making repairs and cut vegetable growth, and a devata, a spirit, basically, was living in the tree they cut. And so it decided to retaliate and just murder some of these monks at Alavi, but then thought better of it, and the spirit went to Lord Buddha and said, I was going to kill those monks for cutting down my tree, but I decided not to. I decided I should come tell you about it. And Buddha's like, it's good that you told me. So he made that rule. So the story goes. Next, the monks at Alavi sprinkled grass and clay with water, which they knew contained life. That was in Pakitiya 20. So, there you have the monks at Alavi. Thank you, monks at Alavi, for joining us. Next, the Venerable Channa, here represented by Homer Simpson from The Simpsons. So, he cleared a site for a vihara and cut down a tree that was used as a shrine revered by the village, the town, and even the whole kingdom. That's right. Rule established, do not kill even one facultied people, is what the Buddha said. One facultied being one sense. So he's talking about like bacteria and stuff. He's talking about tiny critters. So he's saying don't make these tiny little life forms homeless by cutting down trees. So really interesting rule, that one, and kind of shows into the heart of the ahimsa, the nonviolence inherent in Buddhist teachings, at least early original Buddhist teachings. And also, in addition, a group of monks has to come and approve and mark out any site that a monk wants to build a vihara on. So monks can't just decide on their own. They have to get a group to agree that this is an okay place, and no life form will be harmed if you build there. That's Sangha Disesa 7, one of the good ones, in my opinion. Channa indulged in bad habits. Other monks corrected him. He refused to listen to their criticism. That was in Sangha Disesa 12. Next, having indulged in bad habits, he was being examined in the midst of the order and said, who is committed? What has he committed? On what grounds has he committed? How has he committed? What do you say? Why do you say it? Yeah, that was Pakitiya 12. Channa just... When a donor gave him a dwelling place, Channa had it roofed and plastered again and again until it collapsed under its own weight, all the while despoiling the cornfield of a local Brahmin by gathering sticks and grass. That was Pakitiya 19. Don't do that, Channa. Indulged in bad habits, other monks corrected him. He kept doing it out of disrespect. Pakitiya 54. Indulged in bad habits, a monk corrected him, and he said, I will not train myself in this role until I speak to another monk who is expert in discipline. In Pakitiya 71. In Pakitiya 87, he laid down on a high couch. In Pakitiya 89, he put a cloth on a couch that hung down the front and the back. In Pakitiya 90, he wore itch cloths that were not of proper measure. And in Pakitiya 91, he wore cloths for the reins that were not of proper measure. Maybe clothes for the reins. Next. So I'm first going to mention someone who's not a rogue. His name is the Master Daba the Malian, here represented by Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender. Daba the Malian, 7 years after his birth, attained perfection, arhatship. And then he decided he should do something useful, so he became the distributor of food and lodgings. That was in Sangha Disesa 8. Now, here's where we get to the rogues. Metia and Bumajaka. There, you can see him better now. Hotep and Hoi from Prince of Egypt. Now, they weren't the criminals in this case. They weren't the ones doing something naughty. Their students were, but they aren't given names. So they're just called the students of Hotep and Hoi. I mean, the students of Metia and Bumajaka. So they were given inferior food and lodgings and blamed Daba the Mali and said he was practicing favoritism. And that was Pakitiya 13. And in Sangha Disesa 9, they decided to get even. Or rather, in Sangha Disesa 8, they conspired with a nun named Metia. So, yes, here she's, as you can see, represented by Vanessa from The Little Mermaid, which is Ursula in disguise. So, anyway, so she's being deceptive. What she did, or what they told her to do, these monks, they said, we're going to get Daba the Malian kicked out. Go tell Lord Buddha that he forced himself on you. Assaulted you. You know what I'm saying. He had intercourse with you against your will, right? So she did. And then it came out that it wasn't true. And, Buddha asked Daba the Mali, he's like, I didn't do it. It wasn't me, right? And then eventually the monks admitted that they put the nun up to this deception so that they could get Daba the Malian kicked out. And Buddha kicked the nun out. But then later in Sangha Disesa 9, these same students of Metia and Bumajaka saw two goats making love, right? So they said, okay, the male goat, we're going to name Daba the Malian. The female goat, we're going to name the nun Metia. So we can honestly tell Lord Buddha that we saw with our own eyes that they were doing it. And then that didn't work out either. Don't do that, silly students of Metia and Bumajaka. Next, we have Devadatta. As you can see, he's represented here by Jafar from Aladdin. From what I understand, he was a cousin of Lord Buddha, but they didn't mention that in the text so far. But he fomented schism. In other words, if you're not familiar with the word, he, actively is trying to get a group of Buddha's order to leave and start a new order with him at the head, right? By saying, Buddha's not strict enough. He's, hanging out in the village leads to sinful behavior, so he should make a rule that everybody should just stay in the woods. And Buddha's like, no, I'm not going to make that rule, And he's like, well, then you're not really teaching Dhamma then, are you? So it's a bad scene. So, Devadatta, don't do it. That was in Sangha Disesa 10. He started a conspiracy with Kokalika, Katamorkatisaka, and the son of Lady Kanda, as well as Samudadatta, right? These four. So they were followers of Devadatta. They were all in agreement that Devadatta's way was best. And so in Sangha Disesa 11, they defended Devadatta. So they were these guys, the guilty party in Sangha Disesa 11. Next, we have Asaji and Punabasu, here represented by Pumbaa and Timon from The Lion King, the original, not the live-action remake, or whatever that was. The original from the 90s. So students of theirs, again, they're called students of Asaji and Punabasu, so they get the blame. They get the, be the name attached to this story. Students of theirs planted flowering trees, made garlands, wreaths, ear ornaments, breastplates, and then sent them to wives, daughters, girls and slaves, female slaves, of reputable families. And then with them, they ate together from one dish, drank from one beaker, sat on one seat, shared a couch, a mat, a coverlet, ate at the wrong time, drank intoxicants, wore garlands, wore perfumes, sang, danced, played musical instruments, sported, sang and played while the lady danced, and desired, gambled on checkerboards and drop boards, played tip-cat. Apparently you hit a short stick with a long stick. Doesn't sound very exciting to me. And many more games. They mimicked deformities. They learned elephant lore, horse lore, archery, swordsmanship, would run in front of elephants' carts. They'd whistle, wrestle, fight with their fists, spread out their upper robes as a stage, and say to the dancing girl, "Dance here, sister," and applaud. They did all that in Sangha di Sessa 13. You should teach your students better, in my opinion. All right, moving along. Next, okay, we're going to be here for a little while. The group of 6 monks. And yes, that's Heathcliff and the gang. You Zennials, that's like on the border between Gen X and Millennial, might remember them. So, I'll get right to it, and I'll move quickly because there's a lot. They bathed in one set of robes and then changed into a second set of robes afterward, Nisagya 1, in which the maximum number of robes is established. Spoilers, it's 3, but you can keep 4 for 10 days for certain reasons. Anyway, they also asked for robes on behalf of a monk whose robe was stolen, and they took many robes, Nisagya 7. The group of 6 monks asked for silk worms in Nisagya 11. They had a rug made with pure black sheep's wool in Nisagya 12. Don't do that. That's decadent. They made a rug of black sheep's wool with only a thin seam of white wool after, trying to find a loophole around Nisagya 12. They did this in Nisagya 13. In Nisagya 17, they had sheep's wool washed, dyed, and combed by nuns, and these nuns then neglected their studies and their regular practices. They did various transactions with gold and silver in Nisagya 19. They made a hoard of many bowls in Nisagya 21. Everybody gets one bowl, was the rule established there. They chose clothes to be given during the rains before the rains, then went naked when the clothes got wet from the rain in Nisagya 24. They asked for much yarn to have it woven by weavers in Nisagya 26. They knew that robe material was to be donated to the order and said, "Give the robe material to us," in Nisagya 30. They quarreled with well-behaved monks, jeered at them, scoffed at them about birth, name, clan, work, craft, disease, distinguishing mark, passion, attainment, and low mode of address in Pakitiya 2. They brought slander against monks for quarreling, disputing, engaging in contention, and thus causing dissension and quarrels that had not been there previously to arise. Pakitiya 3. They made lay followers speak Dhamma line by line in Pakitiya 4. So apparently there was a rule where you couldn't just make them memorize the Buddha's teachings. You had to explain it to them and use examples and engage with them, right? They brought an unlearned man to attend while they were teaching Dhamma to women, and then the rule was established that if you're going to bring a man along so that you can teach Dhamma to women, then he has to be a learned man. Pakitiya 7, that was. They teased Upananda, that's Upananda, in front of lay followers for being on probation for masturbating or intentionally emitting semen. So they made fun of him in front of non-monks and let them know what he had done and that he was on probation. Don't do that. Keep it private in the order. Pakitiya 9, that was. They laid down in sleeping places intended for the elder monks in Pakitiya 16. They waited until the group of 17 monks, that will make sense later, finished repairing a sleeping place, then grabbed them by the throats and threw them out and took the sleeping place from them in Pakitia 17. See this group of 6 monks. You might notice there's a female among them here with the cats. They're up to something, that's all I'm saying. Anyway, they exhorted nuns to receive requisites and gave only inferior talk, dismissing them. Go, sisters. Pakitia 21. They exhorted the nuns at the nuns' quarters, rather than meeting somewhere or having the nuns come to them, in Pakitia 23. You're not supposed to do that. They claimed that the elder monks were exhorting the nuns only to gain requisites, which is what they were doing, right? Pakitia 24. They arranged to travel along the high road with nuns in Pakitia 27. Don't do that, right? Arranged to travel together in one boat with nuns in Pakitia 28. Now this is moving again very generally and quickly. There's a lot more if you go actually listen to each one of these is like a 45-minute long story. So there's exceptions. Like if it's a dangerous area, then you can travel with the nuns to like protect them, right? But if you're just walking near a village and everybody can see you and there's no opportunity for someone to attack the nuns, then the nuns should walk without monks, right? They stayed on, receiving alms in a public rest house in Pakitia 31. They asked for sumptuous food for themselves and ate it in Pakitia 39. They asked a donor for medicine, and he told them to wait a day, and they refused to wait in Pakitia 47. They went to watch a battle in Pakitia 48. 47 was the medicine one. They stayed with an army for more than 3 nights. Apparently there was some business with the army, and you're not supposed to stay for more than 3 nights. That's Pakitia 49. They went to see a sham fight, so the army was dividing up. And, like when a team is practicing, they do shirts and skins or whatever, or they divide the team in half or invert the colors and have a practice fight. So there was a sham fight, right? Makes sense. Pakitia 50. They got drunk in Pakitia 51. They tickled the group of 17 monks until one of the 17 monks died. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at that. I get time plus tragedy equals comedy, right? 2,600 years is enough, I think. Pakitia 52, that was. They frightened the group of 17 monks, causing them to cry out in Pakitia 55. They knew that the king, the local king, was waiting for them to finish bathing so that he could wash his head, but they kept bathing anyway in Pakitia 57. They hid the bowls of the group of 17 monks in Pakitia 60. They knowingly made use of water which contained living things in Pakitia 62. They brought up for debate a matter that had already been formally settled in Pakitia 63. They ate and shared a sleeping place with Arita. That guy, we'll get to him later. Knowing no one was supposed to talk to him. Pakitia 69. They said, on account of what are these lesser and minor rules of teaching recited? They only tend toward remorse, vexation, and perplexity in Pakitia 72. During the recitation of the Patimokkha, the recitation of all these rules, every half month, the monks would recite all the rules for monks, and the nuns would recite all the rules for nuns so that they wouldn't forget the rules, right? They didn't write them down. During the recitation, these 6 monks interrupted it, saying, only now do we understand that this rule is, as is said, handed down in a clause, contained in a clause, and comes up for recitation every half month. Stop interrupting. Stop talking in the middle of the recitation. Pakitia 73. Angry and displeased, they gave the group of 17 monks a blow. Important side note. In old-timey English, that meant that they punched them. So, yeah, anyway. That was Pakitia 74. Angry and displeased, they raised a hand to the group of 17 monks in Pakitia 75. They defamed a monk with an unfounded charge entailing a formal meeting in Pakitia 76. They made the group of 17 monks sad. by telling them, you know, there's a rule against initiating monks under 20. And you guys are all way under 20. Maybe you're not really monks. They cried, you know. Pakitiya 77, that was. They quarreled with well-behaved monks and then eavesdropped and overheard the well-behaved monks complaining about them and saying they're shameless. And then jumped out and said, you have insulted us. You're guilty of that. But no, you're guilty of eavesdropping, guys. Pakitiya 78. They gave consent for one of them to represent all 6 of them in a formal act to be carried out against all of them for indulging in bad habits. Then afterward, they claimed that it was invalid because they hadn't given consent for that one to represent all 6 of them, which they had. So that's Pakitiya 79. They gave consent for one to represent all 6 in a formal act to be carried out against them, and that one during the meeting stood up and walked out. That was Pakitiya 80. One time when Daba the Malian's robe became thin, the order gave him a new one, and the group of 6 monks said, the order gives robes according to acquaintanceship. In Pakitiya 81, when a certain guild was going to present the order with robe material, the group of 6 monks said, give it to these monks. It's not really clear which monks. Maybe themselves or some other specific group. That was Pakitiya 82. Don't do that. Entering the village at the wrong time, they talked of worldly talk. Talk of kings, talk of thieves, talk of great ministers, talk of armies, talk of fears, talk of battles, talk of food, talk of drink, clothes, beds, garlands, scents, relations, vehicles, villages, little towns, talk of the country, talk of women, talk of strong drink, talk of streets, of wells, of those departed before, about diversity, speculation about the world, speculation about the sea, talk on becoming and not becoming thus or thus. Don't do that. All right. That was Pakitiya 85. In Pakitiya 88, they had a chair made covered with cotton. Then in Pati Desaniya, which is Confession 2, the group of 6 nuns seem like they're not properly dressed, but that's not what this is about. Obviously, they're represented by the Sailor Scouts, Sailor Moon, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and Mars, obviously. But anyway, we'll get to them later. So in this, the rule was something the monks did wrong. So what happened was the group of 6 nuns were directing people to give food to the group of 6 monks. And the group of 6 monks did not restrain the group of 6 nuns. So the group of 6 monks did something wrong by not restraining the nuns. The nuns didn't do anything wrong. Interesting, huh? Pati Desaniya 2, that was. Okay, we're done for now with the group of 6 monks. So this can move forward. The Venerable Upananda, the son of the Sakyans. He's represented here as Zahir from Legend of Korra, sequel to Last Airbender. Upananda demanded a householder give him a robe in Nisaggiya 6. Upananda said, make my robe like this in Nisaggiyas 8 and 9, with some slight variation in the stories. He refused to wait 1 day for his new robe that was being gifted to him in Nisaggiya 10. Upananda accepted a kahapana, which is kind of like money, instead of the meat that he was expecting in Nisaggiya 18. The guy was like, I don't have the meat I promised I was going to give you. I gave it to my son in the middle of the night. Can I give you money instead and you can go buy the meat? And he was like, I'm not supposed to, but all right. So then, anyway, in Nisaggiya 20, he engaged in bartering. Upananda asked his brother's cellmate to go on a tour of the country with him. And his brother's cellmate was like, my robe isn't good enough. And so he gave him a new robe. Upananda gave this guy a new robe. Then the guy heard that Lord Buddha was going on a tour of the country, and he's like, oh, I'm going to go with Lord Buddha. And when Upananda said, okay, let's go on tour of the country, he's like, oh, I'm not going with you, I'm going with Lord Buddha. He's like, oh yeah, well that robe's going to go with me. And he tore it off of him in anger. So don't tear robes off of people in anger. Nisagaya 25. In Nisagaya 27, Upananda heard a robe was to be prepared for him by a donor, and he told the weaver of that family, make it evenly woven, well scraped, and well combed. That was Nisagaya 27. Next, he tells his brother's cellmate, let's go for alms today. And then at the last minute, he's like, don't come with me, I can't stand you, I don't like being around you, you make me miserable. And so that monk went hungry. Some kind of issue going on between Upananda and his brother's cellmate, if you ask me. Pakitiya 42, that was. He sat in the home of a married couple. The husband was looking at his wife, and he was like, hey, monk, I think it's time for you to go. And the wife saw the husband looking at her like that, and she was like, Upananda, don't go. Don't listen to my husband. Stay a while. And then the husband was like, no, go. And she was like, stay. And he was like, well, I'll stay. Don't do that, Upananda. Let the husband be alone with his wife, apparently, is the rule. Right? So then later he went to a friend's house. His friend wasn't home. So he sat alone together with the man's wife in his home. Don't do that. Pakitiya 44. He went to a friend's house. His friend wasn't home, so he sat together with the man's wife in a private place. I guess maybe not in the home, but somewhere else. So he's like, well, we can't stay in the home. They made a new rule because of last time, so why don't we go sit under that tree? That was Pakitiya 45. He was called upon by a specific family for a meal. He stopped to visit other families on his way and ended up arriving late. In Pakitiya 46, Upananda, having assigned a robe to his brother's cellmate, made use of it without asking his brother's cellmate, right? Pakitiya 59, that was. He asked another monk to conceal his crime of intentionally emitting semen. And in this case, it was the other monk, the one who concealed it, that got in trouble. Though, presumably, Upananda, there's reference made to his being on probation for masturbating, even though we didn't get to hear about it directly in the Tipitaka. So that one was Pakitiya 64. Don't conceal information about a fellow monk spanking the monkey. Next, the Venerable Pilindavacha, here represented by No Face from Spirited Away. That might make sense in a minute if you've seen Spirited Away. So, he wanted to clear a cave. The king was like, hey, what's going on with that cave? And, why don't you come work for me? And you're so great, I'll give you servants, right? And so at one point, Pilindavacha heard a girl in the village crying, and he went and asked, why is she crying? And they said, well, all the other little girls have ornaments and things to wear, and she doesn't have it. So he put together some grass and said, have her put this upon her head. And they put it on her head, and it turned to a gold tiara. So this guy's magical, like No Face. He can manifest gold, right? And so the king hears about this and arrests the girl's family, thinking they must have stolen it, probably from him or one of his, concubines or whatever. And so Pilindavacha goes to the king and says, hey, why did you arrest that family? And he's like, well, she had this gold thing. And he's like, well, so how long has your palace here been gold? And suddenly the palace turned to gold. And the king's like, oh, okay, you're freaking magic, And so word got out, and people were bringing all kinds of food and abundant medicines and honey and all kinds of stuff. And so Pilindavacha was distributing it to the monks that were around him, and so they all got in trouble for living in total abundance and decadence. So that's fun. Next, Hataka, the son of the Sakyans, here represented by Retcon, or Bretcon, if you will. That will make sense if you've seen that episode. Otherwise, just ignore it. From Rick and Morty. He was overthrown in debate. He was talking with other sects holding other views, so non-Buddhists. He was debating with non-Buddhists, and he was, on the side of Buddhism, right? But he, having denied something, would acknowledge it. Having acknowledged something, would deny it. He shelved a question by asking another question. He told a conscious lie. And having made a rendezvous, he deceived with words. Don't do that, Hataka, the son of the Sakyans. Pakitiya, expiation 1. That's the only rule he's in that we've heard about so far. Next, the Venerable Anuradha, here shown as Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, or Gaston. He lied down in a sleeping place with a woman. See, what happened was, he's actually one of the 10 principal disciples. So he was walking, just to cut short, he said, can I sleep in your rest house? Like, these days it'd be like a hotel, or a guest house. Someone has a spare room, an Airbnb, right? Room in the back. And then some other travelers and said, hey, can we stay in your guest house? And, or in your rest home or whatever, rest house. And she's like, that really good-looking monk is, I told him he could stay there, but now he's going to be crowded with these like random travelers. So she's like, hey monk, why don't you come sleep in my sleeping place, right? And then, after everybody's gone to sleep, she's like, you're really attractive. I'm really attracted to you. Or don't you find me attractive? Men find me so attractive, but I just think you're so attractive. And the fact that you're a monk, and she starts like undressing and stuff. And he resists. He doesn't touch her, right? He was a good boy. But the rule that got established that day was don't share a sleeping place with a lady. That's Pakitiya 6. Next, we have, as promised, the group of 17 monks. Now, there's a story we'll get to later where basically they were initiated very young. And then, as a result of their being initiated as monks, a new rule was established that you have to be 20 years old in the ancient order to become a monk. So they were the ones that slipped through before, and apparently they were like 7 or 8, like they were really young because the way they were behaving. So hence, Muppet babies representing the group of 17 monks. Having spread a sleeping place in a dwelling belonging to the order, they set forth for the day without removing their sleeping, like their sleeping bags or whatever. They just got up and left. Kid stuff. Pakitiya 15. That was Pakitiya 15. Next is Pakitiya 37. They went to a festival on a mountaintop and ate solid food at the wrong time. Oh, you guys. Always getting bullied by the group of 6 monks, but their rules that they broke they seem really minor, right? Next, they sported in the water. Apparently, don't do that. If you're going to be a monk, you don't get to play water polo. Pakitiya 53. That's the ancient order, by the way. Probably today you can get away with a little water sports. I think. Comment below if you're a monk today on whether or not you're allowed to sport in the water. Next, the Venerable Kula Pantaka, here shown as, of course, Clark Kent, Superman. He gave a boring exhortation to nuns. They were like, this is so boring. But then he levitated, and they were like, this is so good. I love your exhortation. Tell us more. And they ended up staying out past sunset. Don't do that. Nuns got to go home before sunset. Pakitiya 22, that was. Next, the Venerable Bella Tasisa, here shown as Uncle Iroh, who we love, from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He dried and stored some boiled rice he had received when he went begging for alms, and then stored it and ate it later. Don't do that, apparently. Pakitiya 38, that was. Seemed like the sort of thing that he would do, but he's more interested in tea, but I think he's also interested in rice when he gets hungry. Next, the Venerable Ananda. Now, Ananda, of course, is one of the 10 principal disciples. In fact, he's one of like the top 2 principal disciples. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's a cousin of Lord Buddha as well, but he's the good cousin, right? So here he's represented by Guru Patik from Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you don't know who that is, I recommend watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, the old cartoon, Nickelodeon cartoon. The whole thing. Not just the episode he's in, just watch the whole show. It's worth it. And when you get to see this character in the show, you'll be like, now I understand why he wanted me to watch this show. Avatar: The Last Airbender, write it down. Not the movie, not the live action movie, not the movie with the blue people called The Avatar, but the cartoon of so many series, seasons, I don't know how many, four seasons, maybe 5, called Avatar: The Last Airbender. Maybe it was 3 seasons, I'm not sure. Anyway, the Venerable Ananda gave 2 cakes to a female wanderer. They had a lot of cakes that day, and he was just distributing them. He meant to give her 1, but there were 2 stuck together. He wasn't thinking, he didn't notice, and he just gave her 2. People were like, why did he give you 2? So Lord Buddha said, don't give food to female wanderers. All right, different time. That was Pakitiya 41. So, having been appointed, this is Ananda again, having been appointed to teach the women in the court of King Pasenadi of Kosala, one day Ananda, the Venerable, arrived unannounced and walked in and accidentally saw the king and queen undressed together. Right, so that was Pakitiya 83. Thank you, Ananda, for being here today. Next, Upali, baby Kermit. You saw him before. He was one of the 17 monks, right? His parents said, if he becomes a monk, he'll be well taken care of. And he overheard his parents, and he went and told his 16 friends, and then they all became monks. The monk who initiated him got in trouble for initiating children. I mean, the rule was established based on what he did. So he wasn't in trouble for the rule, because the rule didn't exist yet, right? Does that make sense? So, the monk Arita, who'd previously been a vulture trainer. Thank you for the vulture noise, Editor Edward. So here he's represented by Honest John Foulfellow from Pinocchio, the old cartoon, because he wouldn't stop saying, the Dharma taught by the Lord, as I understand it, is that in doing the things he calls stumbling blocks, one finds they are not stumbling blocks at all. And he wouldn't stop saying that. So it was a Pakitiya rule, 68, and they also shunned him. No one was allowed to talk to him until he stopped saying that, right? Next, we have the novice Kandaka. Looks a little similar to the monk Arita, but this time it's Nick Wilde from Zootopia. And he was a novice, not a monk yet, but he was a novice who wouldn't stop saying the same thing. The Dhamma taught by the Lord, as I understand it, is that in doing the things he calls stumbling blocks, one finds they are not stumbling blocks at all. That was Pakitiya 70. Next, the Venerable Nanda, not to be confused with Ananda, here represented as Prince Charming from Cinderella. So he was said to be good to look upon and charming. He wore, one day he wore a wayfarer's robe, and monks from a distance thought he was the Lord. Apparently Lord Buddha wore something called a wayfarer's robe. So they made a rule, don't do that. Wear a normal monk's robe, not the Buddha's monk's robe. That was Pakitiya 92. So there you have the entire Rogues Gallery from the Rules for Monks. Moving along. The rules for nuns. First, the nun Sundarinanda, here represented as Samantha from Bewitched. She was also beautiful, good to look upon, and charming. One day, filled with desire, she consented to making physical contact with a man who was also filled with desire. That was Bhikkhuni Vibhanga Parajika 1. So we're back to the big rules, Parajika, that we started with, except this time it's for nuns. Bhikkhuni Vibhanga, not the other Vibhanga. And then another time, she, filled with desire, accepted food from a man who was also filled with desire. That was Sangha Disesa 5. The nun Tulananda, here shown, represented by the wicked stepmother from Cinderella, Lady Tremaine. She knew that Sundari Nanda had become pregnant, but Tulananda didn't tell anyone. So you're supposed to tell on your fellow monk or nun. If you're a monk and another monk is spanking the monkey, you have to tell on him. If you're a nun and the nun next to you is pregnant, you have to tell on them. You're not allowed to keep it a secret in the old order. She said, she's like a sister to me. Her shame is also my shame. How could I reveal it? So that was the nun Tulananda, Parajika 2. Next, she imitated the monk Arita, who had previously been a vulture trainer, saying that whole thing about the Buddha's Dhamma, as I understand it, is do the things he says not to do, right? That was Parajika 3. Next, she refused to give back a storeroom that had been donated to the order of nuns by the father of two brothers. So a man was devout and gave this storehouse to the nuns, and then he died, and his kids said, we want that back. And she actually went to court over it, and the court ruled in her favor. And so the order got a bad reputation for taking people to court and stuff like that. So they just give it back. If the kids of the person who donated it, it's hey, we need that, just give it back, right? That's the rule. That was Sangha Disesa 1. Next, she knowingly initiated a nun who was wanted for a crime punishable by death. The crime was adultery, by the way. It's a different time. And she was also a thief because she had taken some stuff from her own house, which apparently that stuff was considered to be her husband's, who she was running out on. So she was a thief and wanted for crime punishable by death. So you can't initiate her as a nun without getting permission from the order of nuns. See, that's why you want to listen to the whole rule, not just these synopses. Anyway, next, a group of nuns waited until Tulananda was away and made a formal act against the nun Kandakali, who was a nun who made strife, quarrels, contention, brawls, and disputes. They wanted to suspend her for not seeing an offense, and when Tulananda heard that her friend or whatever had been kicked out, she gathered a different group of nuns and restored the nun. So that was, don't do that, Tulananda. That was Sangha Disesa 4 in the Bhikkhuna Vibhanga. Next, students of Tulananda were living in company of evil habits, of evil repute, evil ways of living, vexing the order of nuns, which they explain as when they're having a formal meeting, they always object to any rule being pronounced against the other sisters in their little clique, right? Vexing the order of nuns, that's called. And concealing each other's sins. They did this in Sangha Disesa 9. Then, in Sangha Disesa 10, Tulananda, after being admonished, told her students, go ahead and live as though in company, and of evil habits, evil repute, evil ways, and vexing the order of nuns and concealing each other's sins. Other nuns do it, and they don't get in trouble. They're targeting you, So she got in trouble, they don't do that. Don't say that, basically, is the rule that was established in Sangha Disesa 10 after she did that. Next, as already mentioned, the nun Kandakali, here represented as Azula, the fire princess from Avatar, the Last Airbender. As I mentioned, she made strife, quarrels, contention, brawls, and disputes. One day, in frustration, she said, I repudiate, meaning I refuse to believe, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the training. Who are these recluses, the daughters of the Sakyans, the Buddhist nuns? There are other better recluses. I'll go lead the Dhamma life among these. She said this in Sangha Disesa 7, and apparently didn't leave. I think if she had walked out, then they wouldn't have been putting her on trial for saying that, right? Then, a different time, following some legal proceeding, she said, the nuns are following a wrong course through hatred, desire, stupidity, and fear. That was Sangha Disesa 8. Okay, now we have the group of 6 nuns you saw before. They consented to hold the hand of a male person who was filled with desire, They took hold of his outer robe, the edge of his outer robe. They stood and talked with a man. They went to a rendezvous with a man. They consented to a man approaching them. They went to a covered place with him, and they disposed the body for such a purpose. I'm not sure what that means, because what I think it means was already Parajika 1, and this is Parajika 4. So, there you have the complete Rogues Gallery of the Tipitaka up till now. And just a little bit of bonus material. There were the very bottom rung of rules where they say it's just a wrongdoing. So there's, you get kicked out, the Parajika, the Sangha Sessa, Nisagiya, all these different levels. And then at the very bottom, they have rules that they call training. I've put them in, if you're looking on the list of episodes, they're the ones called Sekhiya Dhamma, which just means good behavior. They're in the Tipitaka, they're not called the Sekhiya Dhamma. I've chosen to use that phrase because that's kind of what it's related to. So, they all have to do, not every Sekhiya Dhamma, some of them are, there was a certain monk, or there was, 2 monks, but most of them are the group of 6 monks. So we're going to come back to the group of 6 monks, a little bit of bonus 6 monks. These are very, very small rules that were established based on their behavior. I'll just run through it real quick. Wearing an inner robe hanging down in front and behind, Sekhiya Dhamma 1. Upper robe hanging in front and behind, Sekhiya Dhamma 2. They went amongst houses with their bodies uncovered, in Sekhiya Dhamma 3. In Sekhiya Dhamma number 4, they sat down amongst the houses with their bodies uncovered. 5, they went amongst the houses making play with their hands and feet. 6, they sat down amongst the houses making play with their hands and feet. 7, they went amongst the houses looking here and there. 8, they sat down amongst the houses looking here and there. 9, they went amongst the houses lifting up their robes. 10, they sat down amongst the houses lifting up their robes. 11, they went amongst the houses laughing a great laugh. 12, they sat down amongst the houses laughing a great laugh. 13, they went amongst the houses making a loud noise. 14, they sat down amongst the houses making a loud noise. 15, they went amongst the houses swaying the body. 16, they sat down amongst the houses, swaying the body. 17, they went amongst the houses with their arms swaying. 18, they sat amongst the houses with their arms swaying. 19, they went amongst the houses swaying their heads. 20, they sat amongst the houses swaying their heads. 21, they went amongst the houses with their arms akimbo, like Peter Pan or Superman. 22, they sat amongst the houses with their arms akimbo. 23, they went amongst the houses with their upper robes over their heads, like Beavis doing cornholio. 24, they sat amongst the houses with their upper robes over their heads. 25, they went amongst the houses crouching down on their heels. 26, they sat amongst the houses lolling, which is apparently like lollygagging. I'm thinking maybe our lollygagging is originated in this British word lolling. It's just a guess. Comment below, linguistics professionals. Accepted alms food inattentively. That was Sekhiya Dhamma 27. 28, they accepted alms food while looking here and there. 29, they accepted much curry with their alms food. 30, they accepted heaped up alms food. 31, they ate alms food inattentively. 32, they ate alms food while looking here and there. 33, having chosen here and there, they ate alms food. So they specifically targeted the people they knew had the good food, right? 34, eating alms food, they ate much curry. 35, having chosen from the top, ate alms food. 36, covered up curry and condiment with kanji, desiring something more. 37, having asked for curry and kanji for themselves, they ate it. 38, they looked at others' bowls, captious-mindedly, like jealous of what they had, the other monks had gotten on their alms tours, begging for food, 39, they made up large mouthfuls. 40, they made up long pieces of food. 41, they opened the door of the face when the mouthful was not brought close. So they opened their mouth wide before the food was about to go in, right? 42, while eating, they put the whole hand into the mouth. 43, they talked with a mouthful in the mouth. I approve of that rule. Don't talk with your mouth full. 44, they ate tossing up balls of food. 45, they ate breaking up the mouthfuls. 46, they ate stuffing their cheeks. 47, they ate shaking the hands about. 48, they ate scattering lumps of boiled rice everywhere. 49, they ate putting out their tongues. 50, they ate smacking their lips. 52, they ate licking the fingers. So we skipped from 50 to 52 because 51 wasn't about the group of 6 monks. 53, they ate licking the bowl. 54, they ate licking their lips. 55, they accepted a drinking cup with their hands soiled with food. That was 55. 56, they threw out amidst the houses rinsings from their bowls, which included lumps of rice. 57, they taught Dhamma to someone who had a sunshade in his hand. 58, they taught Dhamma to someone with a staff in his hand. 59, they taught some Dhamma to someone with a knife in his hand. 60, they taught Dhamma to someone with a weapon in his hand. 61, they taught Dhamma to someone who was wearing shoes. 62, they taught Dhamma to someone who was wearing sandals. 63, they taught someone in a vehicle. 64, they taught someone in a bed. 65, they taught someone who was sitting down lolling. 66, they taught someone who was wearing a turban on his head. I'm sorry, Bugs Bunny. It's the rules. It's not me. I'm not, racist. Okay, so they taught someone, 67, they taught someone whose head was muffled up. 68, the 6 monks sat on the ground and taught someone who was sitting on a seat. 69, they sat on a low seat and taught someone who was sitting on a high seat. 70, they, while standing, taught someone who was sitting. 71, they were walking behind some people and teaching them the Dhamma. And 72, the 6 were going along the side of a path and taught someone who was walking along the path. In Sekya Dhamma 73, they peed standing up. Apparently, it splashes up onto their robes, so don't do that. In 74, they peed and spat on green corn. And finally, in Sekya Dhamma 75, they peed and spat in the water. Thank you to all the rogues in the Rogues Gallery. That was fun. And that's our celebration of this being the 100th recital of the Tipitaka on the Buddhist Books podcast.